sharing 11 of the scariest ghost stories from Reddit. What did I just do? Alright, so I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime, and both groups were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories. When we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were positive we were hearing a little girl inside the surface area we heard the noises from together. There was a field behind our campsites, and we saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field making noises. We all agreed this thing maybe looked 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as can be. We made our way closer to investigate, but what it was that we started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared in the trees. All night we continued to hear a little girl calling for help as we tried to sleep. The Walking Dead. I'm a physiatric nurse, and in my early career, I worked as a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he couldn't talk. But there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life. In fact, seemed quite normal back then. With the acceptation, where was I? Of being close to 7 feet tall, he had been raised in the deep south and joined the military when he was 19. But one night he vanished. He was declared AWOL, a wool, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot tall man walked into VA hospital emergency room. In my part of the Midwest, and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Douchy," not the real name, "and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reporting to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man, and that simply whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again. Marion paced all day, every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unremitting habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as far as he were laughing hurriedly, but not even taking a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he'd be listening periodically, throwing his head back in laughing, mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either, or negatively. Occupationally therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at that job, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later, I wondered if all along I've been dealing with a ghost. All these years, I still don't know. The unrest stopped. I want to take a break for a second. That's a really long one. So, I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16. My sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested, still on alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break. So we stopped at the rest stop we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on the road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us. Two young men standing still outside of it. When we got out there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night and never had been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside. I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the two men had not moved at all, not an inch. They were just talking. They weren't talking. They weren't on phones. They were just standing there, still as stone. My sister and my mom came running back out to the car. When they got in, the two men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to we all saw the same thing. They had dark eyes as pitch and empty, truly empty, not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about that entire experience, we couldn't find this place on any map. We knew exactly which spot to look on the interstate to look, and we couldn't find that on Google Maps or any paper we had. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on the stretch of the road and only got confused looks. We've traveled on that interstate since, and there's no rest stop. It came first in the graveyard. We were driving my friend's really old beat-up Supra through a massive graveyard. We stopped and walked downhill, came across the little pond. There was someone sitting on a rock on the other side of the pond. The figure was all black and couldn't make out any features of. Other than that, it looked like a man who was wearing some old style top hat. We stupidly waved and shouted hi. He didn't show any acknowledgement and continued sitting on the rock. All of a sudden, he jumped to his feet, started running to us on the water, then vanished in thin air. And then water. About halfway on the pond, my friends and I screamed and ran back to the car. The car wouldn't start. We had heard something banging on the back of the car. It wasn't a constant bang, but every few seconds so we heard it. Nobody was outside from what we could see in the dark. but something was making a noise on the car. I opened my phone and started dialing my mom to come give us the boost. But I had no service. None of us had cell service. The next 30 minutes, which were spent trying to get her car started. No banging was heard after that. But we felt heavy pressure around us. Finally, the car started, and when she hit the pedal to the metal, we sped out of the graveyard so fast, immediately crossing the gates. As all of our phones regained cell service, one thing I know for certain is that someone or something was out there, and it was not an animal or human. Okay. It was good to see an old friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside town, I'd see someone on the side of the road flagging me down. It turned out it was one of the guys I attended with school. Jim. That's his name. Gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFU and have a drink. He says, no, just take me home. Jim's parents had only lived a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I had turned in that direction, but he said, take him to the outskirts of town. There is a mobile home parked out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turn, he said, drop me off here. It was good to see you again. And he walks off into the night. I go to the VFU, meet some of my old classmates. We start to talk. As we are talking about who's coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I just had picked up Jim up 3 miles east of town and dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as my new t-shirt. Barb, Jim died on that curb 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral, I was told. I started to feel really dizzy and went out to the car to take some breaths. There on the seat is a local newspaper printed 8 years previous, counting Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Okay, that's a really long video.